Great. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to the first of VIA Sponsorship's online webinars. Put together to replace our Bums on Seats conference, which was due to take place in March, and latterly in October. We decided that we had too good a speaker list not to put it out to the world. This is the first time we've ever put together an online conference, so please bear with us a little bit. We are and have gone through a learning curve, a very steep one, like most people with webinars. But the plan is to run these webinars on a Wednesday for approximately 1.5 to 2 hours, depending on the amount of questions we get and engagement with the audience and the speakers. And we'll be running different topics, which you've probably seen on our social media and website. So the first conference is basically regarding the COVID issues that have faced us for the last 7 months, and look as though they're not going away too quickly, certainly not in the UK. So it brings me on to our speakers, and the first speaker that we have is Andy Westlake. So Andy Westlake is the chairman of the European Sponsorship Association, and they've been performing a lot of data and research on COVID and how sponsorship has been affected. And he has a very interesting opening talk on the results of that, which I think most of you will find very, very interesting. Then we have Alan McLeish, the managing director of QTS, probably one of the biggest supporters I know in certainly Scottish sport and further afield down into England. And Alan will be giving you a little bit of background as to his sponsorship and some of the latest things that he's been carrying out through the last 7 months. And our third speaker is Andrew Pindar, again, another highly successful businessman who has shown great support for sailing and yacht racing, and an ambassador for disability sailing, and also currently looking after 2 sponsored athletes who are going to be off and are actually up and running in the next 2 weeks with major international yacht racing events, and he'll explain a little bit behind that and his thoughts. So that brings me on now to our first speaker, who is Andy Westlake. Andy basically is the chairman of ESA, and he's worked in the sponsorship industry for over 25 years. He started in radio and cross-media sponsorship before moving into the agency world. He moved into the agency world with CIA Media Network, and then latterly Fast Track, part of CSM. And CSM have managed brands such as the Clydesdale Bank, Land Rover, HSBC and Emirates, amongst many others. Andy's work has helped them return real value for their business through partnerships in sport, and he now runs Westlake Consulting, which works to deliver powerful sponsorship in sport. He's also on the board of Bucks, chairman of Chesham United Ladies Football Club, and chairman of the European Sponsorship Association. So I would like to pass now straight over to Andy, and we'll let him start with the first of the talks.
I'm unable to start video, so I think somebody else needs to start my video for me, Gordon.
All right, okay.
I think Alice needs to start my video. Here we go. Perfect. Hello, everybody. I always try and get a gratuitous plug in for Chesham United Ladies Football Club, so I've got that in early, and so we can move on from that now. Gordon, thanks a million for the invitation. As Gordon says, I've got 15 or 20 minutes. Gordon's asked me to be very prompt on 20 minutes, so I shall talk for no more than 20 minutes. And my intention really is to try and answer the question as best I can that was set: where should sponsors put their money to get the best ROI and ROO, and especially in the context of COVID and the effects that we've all felt in the industry as a result of COVID-19. So as introduced, Andy Westlake, I'm chairman of the European Sponsorship Association. director of my own consultancy. I couldn't come up with a better name than Westlake Consulting. I probably could, I guess, if I was given time or the inclination to do so. But so yeah, very proud to be chairman of ESSA, and that's really why I'm here today. What I want to talk about is some key trends that are influencing the continued growth of the market, and continued growth that you can see on this chart. The sponsorship industry has had a really buoyant time for the last 15 years, but if you look at the numbers for the last 5, it's a $68 billion industry in 2019. That is inevitably going to get hit quite hard in 2020 as a result of COVID. But it's a growing industry, and so an industry that we're keen to continue to support, and our mission to inspire, unite and grow the sponsorship industry. So that's kind of why we exist, and we bring our members together to help to publicize and merchandise the power of the industry of sponsorship. And so what we did back in January, back to the trends conversation, we asked our community to give us some trends that they thought were going to motivate and inspire that continued growth throughout 2020 and beyond. And so we asked 2 questions. What are the key trends for 2020? But we also asked, what is the one key thing that this industry needs to focus on to continue to inspire growth over the next 10 years? Clearly, what's happened since we asked those questions is that we've had COVID hit. And so what I've tried to do today is to shine a bit of a light on the experience we've had since we went into lockdown. And we've done about 15 webinars now since March with our community. And so what I've tried to do is shine a bit of the learning that we've had during the COVID period on those trends, and say, what do I think now are the key trends that are motivating the industry going forward that will get us back on that trajectory towards growth, a word I can't ever say properly. So a handful of key trends that I think are important. While we are quite rightly all completely fixated at the moment on COVID and the effect it's having on our industry, sport really suffering, arts and culture really suffering, the agency community suffering as a result of brands doing less. I think coming at us around the corner is the next big thing that I know rights holders, brands and agencies are already beginning to really get their heads around very strongly, and that's the issue of sustainability. I think we've got William Ward from Clipper Ventures on today, an organization that's fully signed up to the UN sustainability goals. You've got people like Formula E very actively now saying they're net carbon zero, and so the sustainability is going to be the next big topic. And if I listen to my son, a 19-year-old who is passionate about the issues affecting our planet, this is just going to get a bigger and bigger thing. And so Octopus Energy and their partnership with Arsenal Football Club, for example, where they are really proactively activating around the sustainability agenda. A big organization like Shell, a client of mine actually, who have a major global program called the Shell Eco Marathon. They put millions and millions of dollars in around the world because, again, this is contributing to their journey towards net carbon zero. So one of our colleagues in Russia, Evgenia, said sustainability will become the main criteria for the success of sponsorship and partnership in the future. We risk alienating younger audiences by ignoring their values in the pursuit of profit. So I think sustainability is a thing that has just been magnified to a great extent by COVID, because I think people see that this is the next bus that's coming onto the stand, and they need to be ready to get on it, if you'll excuse the metaphor. The second big thing is the area of measurement. And I know the topic of today was all about return on investment and return on objectives. And I think measurement continues to be a trend that is affecting our industry. It was the one thing that our community felt was the most important thing we needed to answer over the next 10 years. And we ran a seminar yesterday with Lou Johnson, the CEO of Fuse, one of the big agencies in London. She was saying measurement is now more important than it's ever been, because no client is spending money in these tough times with COVID without having some confidence that that money spent will return direct value to the organization. So, some great examples from the ESSA Awards, the Ann Post Awards that won the main ESSA Award last year. The work that Boots did with women's football really embedded measurement and evaluation at the very heart. It's about effectiveness too, not just about measurement. And there was a quote, the body of evidence proving the value of sponsorship, how and why it works will increase. We must ensure that marketers have more confidence in their sponsorship decision making. Data, everybody talks about data, and I'll talk about it too. I think it's crucial that everybody on this call, in agencies, rights holders and brands, really understands the relationship they have with the fans that they're talking to. Rights holders should be thinking about auditing the data they own, building that into meaningful packages, helping their sponsors to activate using their data and using the data they have to measure the impact. And an organisation like PwC say adoption of a data culture within a club's organisation is key to maintaining a competitive edge in the age of highly demanding digital natives. So data is still a trend. And again, I think because COVID has forced most rights holders and brands to now activate in a digital ecosystem, the power of data is even more valuable and important now than it ever has been. So worry about data, worry about who the fans are, and I think then you're teeing yourselves up for better success once we come out of the back of COVID. Sorry, I can't see the heading there. The impact of that data clearly is then how can you use the data to have campaigns that live in this digital transformation and innovation space. Once you understand who the fans are and where you can reach them through digital or social, then using that data to have powerful and ongoing relationships with people is even more crucial. So, sorry, Mike, just quickly, there you go. So, you know, another great example from the ESSA Awards, but I think we've seen dozens and dozens and dozens of great case studies over the period of COVID where brands and rights holders have pivoted to the world of digital. So take Formula One, for example. Formula One, no races, so they do Formula One eSport. They stand it up in a really, really credible way. Organizations like DHL right at the heart of that activity. You look at the NFL in the US, the NFL, no live events. They stand up the draft on digital and social, and they embed their sponsors right at the heart of that activation. So digital and personalization is crucial. Personalization is again a really important part of this story, that more and more rights holders are getting their heads around how they can have relationships with the individual sports fans. So you'll see that picture with the J League, Japanese Soccer League, providing fans with bespoke highlight clips using AI and machine learning that is specifically based on their preferences, which players they like, what type of goals they like to see. So this world of data and personalization is going at 1,000,000 miles an hour and has been accelerated in a massive way by this switch to digital as a result of a lack of live events and live opportunities. Brand purpose. Brand purpose was a big theme in January when we asked the question, and actually brand purpose again has become even more important as a result of what we've seen from COVID. We see the Colin Kaepernick work. Colin Kaepernick work with Nike won the entertainment line for sport at the Cannes Lions in 2019 as one of the most standout pieces of work, and it has real brand purpose right at its heart. And actually that brand purpose, as a result of the Black Lives Matter stuff that we've seen over the last 6 months, has become even more important. And we've also seen COVID not force, but inspire brands to have a much more flexible and responsible approach to the communities that they live and work in. So you've seen Pret right at the beginning of lockdown getting right on the front foot about the NHS workers and what they were doing to support us. So this idea of brand purpose has become ever more important, especially as we're all going through this challenging period with the impact that COVID are having on us, on our lives, our day-to-day lives. So brand purpose, I think, will continue to be a big trend. And I think we in the sport and entertainment industry have a real opportunity to provide brands with an opportunity to say something really authentic about their values and about their mission. It gives them an opportunity to be a really authentic and credible part of the communities in which they trade. And we're going to hear from Alan later, I'm sure, who'll reflect a little bit on that, how QTS are able to really, really authentically connect with the communities that they do business with through the power of community sport and local sport. So brand purpose continues to be a key trend. And I think women in sport and entertainment also continues to be a big trend. And I think we have some people from the Scottish Ballet on today. And I didn't choose this picture intentionally because you were on, and hello to you. I chose it because because it's such a striking image, but B, it's important that we recognise women in sport and entertainment, that the power of females in the world of entertainment is growing all the time. As I said earlier, as my gratuitous mention of my chairmanship of Chesham United Ladies Football Club, I see even at a grassroots level, women's sport has got super duper momentum. And so, and I think that's been exacerbated even more so by COVID, because people have begun to group more and more around their community hubs, around their community clubs. And so women's sport is getting, you know, more column inches in the newspapers, getting more time on the BBC and the main terrestrial networks, and is bringing more commercial revenue. So we've seen lots and lots of big sponsors sign up to women's sport, and we've seen some great examples, you know, the Hockey World Cup with the Irish team doing incredibly well in 2019, the great work that Boots have done, and others actually with women's football. Sky Brown, the young female skateboarder that was due to be the youngest ever Olympian, British Olympian, in 2020, but will have to go again in 2021, and is a real medal hope for park skateboarding next year. And great stuff for the Women's Euros, for the Women's Rugby League World Cup, for netball and others. So women's sport and entertainment is on the rise, and I think that's become a narrative that hasn't slowed down during COVID in the slightest. And esport, I think, is also worthy of discussion. Esport were in a really interesting spot actually as we went into COVID, because a lot of those big leagues were beginning to go to live venues. So you take the Overwatch League or the Call of Duty League, for example, the people that own franchises in those leagues were being given the opportunity to do home matches in their home cities. And a lot of them had venues that they were running live events in. And all of a sudden COVID hit, live events were no longer. And so esport just simply pivoted back to what they'd been doing before, running those leagues on digital channels, on Twitch, on Facebook, in other places. And those leagues have continued to grow and continue to take advantage of this. I'm using the word too much, but the switch, if you like, to the world of digital. So those big leagues, Overwatch, Call of Duty, League of Legends, CSGO, the big franchise leagues, have continued to grow like mad, because people have been locked down and still able to sit at their PCs like we're all doing today and watch some of the best esport athletes in the world competing against each other. We've just had the League of Legends World Championships finishing in China, and you know they've seen bigger audiences than ever. So I think COVID has really inspired growth and acceleration in the world of esport. It's a complex world if you don't understand it, and I'm not going to talk this chart through now, but it's in a really, really exciting place where esport in 2021, if it continues the trend it's been on, will continue to grow next year. There were some other trends in the survey we did in January that I won't dwell on now, but the ones I've talked about, I think, are the ones that I feel are most relevant given the environment that we've all been living through during the last 6 months. So I'm just checking my time. I'm okay for time. I just wanted to quickly touch on this as well, if I can. So for those of you not aware, we've been running a thing called the ESSA Sponsorship Sentiment Tracker since lockdown came in March. And what we wanted to do was to try and take the temperature of the sponsorship industry, to see how confidence was, and to try and understand some of the behaviours that were going on in the industry. And so what you see, if we go from the top left and we go anti-clockwise, what you see is confidence has returned. Back in wave 1, which was done in March, confidence was really hit quite hard, and it returns into the early summer at wave 3. But then obviously we had COVID returning, and sentiment was hit again. But what we've seen in wave 5 is that the brand sentiment has gone up slightly to 6.6 out of 10. Rights holders has dropped again, because I think rights holders are feeling like the world is beginning to shut down again. But agency confidence has really returned, which is a very, very positive thing. Interestingly, if you look at the bottom right, almost 75% of organisations are yet to completely finalise negotiations of sponsorship deals impacted by COVID. So there are still lots and lots of conversations, and I'm sure people out there, some of the audience today from agencies, rights holders and brands, maybe haven't finished their contractual conversations with the people that they have relationships with. And that will all play out, I'm sure, over time. But it continues to be a worry, I think, because a lot of rights holders especially are fearful that because they can't replace the assets that were in the original contract and deliver good value through digital platforms, that there are challenging conversations still to have. However, there are a number have successfully renegotiated their rights, but 35% are waiting for the full impact before making a decision. And then if we go up from there, we also see that a significant portion of the sponsorship industry are doing more to measure and evaluate their partnerships. So rights holders, we've got 53% saying they're measuring and evaluating more, brands at 32, and 50% for agencies. So again, this comes back to the comment I made earlier, which is COVID has meant that every single pound spent has to return value to the organization, and sponsors now are not doing anything unless they're delivering direct value to their bottom line, delivering ROI and ROO, as the title of the slide said at the beginning. And it's reassuring for me that the community of sponsorship over the last 8 months has responded to that by doing more measurement and evaluation to understand the impact of the money that's being spent. So I think that's probably about me. The final thing I just wanted to talk about, and Alan is going to reflect on this in a minute, is a trend that wasn't identified back in January, but has become a really important trend now we're in October, November, which is that of community. I think all of us, I definitely do, with my relationship with the local football club. I definitely feel the power now of the local community. Local football clubs, local rugby clubs have all had a really horrible time over the last 8 months. And I think we're all increasingly coalescing around those community hubs and focusing our effort on our local community more than we ever have. And I don't know about you, but I was sat out on my street having close coffee with the people that I live immediately near that we'd have never done before. So the power of community has become a real thing in the world of sponsorship. And I expect to see more brands activating their relationships with sponsorship by spending money more in their local community than ever. So you look at Cadbury, the work that they've done to sign deals with a whole range of football clubs up and down the land. What they're doing to activate those relationships is really investing in building up that local community cohesion. And so I think it's a real thing. And it came out in our sentiment tracker that trends, things like the pivot to digital, yes, the rise of esport, but this idea of community coupled with sustainability is a really, really important trend that will continue to come round the corner at us. So I think that's me, that's 19 minutes. So thank you ever so much for the audience. Look forward to some questions later. And I hope that was of interest, and happy to pick up offline with anybody that wants to talk further. Thanks.
Well, thanks very much, Andy. Really interesting, showing the trends, especially as it's so much up to date. We're going to open it up to questions, but we're going to wait until Andrew Pindar has finished his before we open it up to the wider audience. But just and I had a couple of questions lined up for you. The first was, are agencies and rights holders doing more to measure? But I think you've answered that. Yes, they are.
Yeah, well, I think they are. And funny, we had I don't know if anybody was on the ESSA. We did an ESSA webinar yesterday, reflecting on the challenges around recruitment and employment in our industry, because furlough scheme is finishing in a minute, and so lots and lots of people, fretting about that. And we had Lou Johnson on from Fuse, the CEO for UK and EMEA from Fuse, and she was saying that she's seeing more and more of her clients really focus on the measurement of effectiveness. That's the key word, not just measurement for measurement's sake, but actually being really clear on what the objectives are up front and putting very specific measurement techniques in place to ensure that they know what the outcomes are. So yeah, I think we're seeing our community lean in much more to measurement and evaluation. I still think there's miles further to go as an industry, but I think, yeah, as you saw from the sentiment tracker, every single segment of the community has responded by doing more, which is really encouraging.
Great. And I suppose our audience is, you know, we have a very mixed audience out there. Everybody from business people to rights holders to event organisers to venues, you know, substantial venues. But I'm going to bring it right down. But what does the likes of a young athlete who probably needs is entering into sport at a young age? What do they need to do to persuade somebody to sponsor them and support them through that pathway to get them up there to the Commonwealth Games or Olympic level? How can they show measurement of it? Give us some examples of a young athlete, maybe a 15, attempting to get a young athlete or a ballet dancer or somebody. How can they effectively show measurement without going to any of these costly measurement systems?
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I guess for me, any sponsorship. Sorry, I'm just pushing this headphone into my ear so I can continue to hear you properly. Any measurement in sponsorship is the same whether you're UEFA or FIFA or you're a small a young athlete starting on their career that wants to do business with a smart sponsor. What you need to do is sit down with that sponsor right at the beginning and have a conversation with them to say, what do you want to get out of this sponsorship? What is important for you as an organization? And to be confident in yourself that you can affect those things that sponsor's looking for. So if a sponsor says to you as a young athlete, well, what I want awareness and I want to be able to change the way people think about my business, but I also want some profile out in the market. Well, those are all things as a young athlete you can affect, and also you can measure. Because, you know, all of the athletes that are on the webinar today, I'm sure will have social media platforms. They'll be on Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and others. And all of those platforms have functionality that enables you to measure the effect and the impact of your posts and how widely they're being seen. So I think that can be set up as a metric really easily with a sponsor. Brand awareness is slightly harder to measure because you probably need to go to a measurement organization to do some analysis. But you could set up a simple online survey that you could send out to your local community, your local Facebook friends, or the people that you have email addresses for, to ask them a simple question, like a MailChimp thing, you know, a simple question to say, are you aware of this business before you start? And do another one 6 months down the line, are you aware of this business? And you'll probably see some really positive shifts. So I think it's all about being really, really focused on what are the objectives of the sponsor that you've brought on? Can you influence those objectives yourself directly? Don't sign up to anything that you can't directly influence yourself. And then, you know, use the available resources that are in the market to be able to deliver some sort of measurement criteria back to that sponsor. I think if a sponsor's, you know, if you're a young athlete and you get a sponsor giving you £5,000, you know, the truth is they probably don't expect a really, really robust return on investment analysis. But there are certainly things that you can do to deliver them something that looks like you're taking their objectives seriously.
Brilliant. Great stuff, Andy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There'll be more questions. Obviously, any of the audience out there that wants to ask Andy any specific questions, if you can hold back until the third speaker, Andrew Pindar, has finished, and then we'll open the floor up to more questions. But thanks very much, Andy, for that great talk. Very, very useful for a lot of people. I hope certainly we've found it very useful to hear the up-to-date position for sponsorship in certainly Europe and the United Kingdom. It brings me on to our next speaker, who is very well known in sport, certainly in Scotland, up here, and has been a huge supporter over many, many years of various sports across the line. So I'd like to introduce Alan McLeish, the Managing Director of QTS. And over the years, Alan has grown QTS into one of the most successful companies in Scotland. Certainly not just in Scotland, in fact, in Great Britain. And it's a business-to-business organisation trading in railways. He's basically been involved in all aspects within the rail network, including design and training services. And he's basically well known for his philanthropic support, just as a charitable donor for very, very many charities, many of which I've been the grateful participant and along at to see Alan's work within the charity sector. and he's bringing them together, going off the back of Andy Westlake's discussion about being involved in the community and also in sport and business. The three don't just sit independently. So Alan has been involved in sponsorship. He's just announced the sponsorship of Darvel Football Club. He's followed on from sponsorship of the Premier League side Kilmarnock Football Club and Derby Football Club down south. He's been involved in the Scottish Sports Awards, Ayr Racecourse and the Scottish League Cup. And he's now also helping, and has been for 2 or 3 years, young people achieve their sporting ambitions all through the QTS Youth Athlete Programme, which has been highly successful, and diverse sports from everything from athletics to boxing, tennis, motorcycle racing, road car racing, and skiing. So I'd like to pass the floor over now to Alan, just to tell us a little bit about his thoughts on the topic. Alan.
Well, that was some introduction, Gordon. Thank you. I'm actually taken aback a wee bit. Anyway, good afternoon, everybody. The QTS, we have got a strong history of sponsoring both at high level and grassroots. One of the things that happened to QTS, and I suppose we get into sponsorship by, not so much by accident, but we wanted to help Kilmarnock Football Club. Kilmarnock came to us at the very last minute and said that their shirt sponsor had pulled out. And at that point, they were desperately in need of funds and desperately in need of a shirt sponsor. Initially, we agreed a 1-year deal with no other kind of, how would you say, thought of how it could or would affect QTS. After, once we started with Kilmarnock, we soon became aware that this is a good way of getting our brand out, because we were a fairly small company and we had struggled to attract the right people, good people coming into the company. And if you think that smaller companies face a challenge of trying to attract people from bigger companies, there's a kind of snobbery within the business community that you don't want to necessarily go to a smaller company because it's seen as being, well, relegated. So it was important, we soon realised it was important for us to get our brand out there. And joining up with Kilmarnock was a breath of fresh air. Kilmarnock's a good family club. And I've got to say, our logo is really strong. The colours are strong, so it seemed to stand out. And I think a lot of the media liked the fact we were not a contentious kind of sponsor. We weren't involved in gambling, alcohol or anything like that. So they kind of took to us. And as I say, it grew from there to the point where I think we were 8 years with Kilmarnock. And one very famous fan of Kilmarnock was Marie Osmond. And this is the power of sponsorship, I suppose, that when she came over, actually, she was doing a gig in Vegas, and one of the Kilmarnock supporters actually paid to meet her backstage and told her that Kilmarnock Football Club's theme kind of song is Paper Roses. And at that point, she said whenever she was in Scotland, she would come and see Kilmarnock, and she did. And the awareness that brought Kilmarnock Football Club and us was incredible. I mean, I was getting people from all over the world actually sending me texts saying that they'd seen Marie with the QTS top on and stuff like that. So again, all of these things work. I think what you've got to decide is what you want from sponsorship. And the reason we kind of chose to get involved, again, was to help the local club. They needed money, they needed a sponsor. We have never actually tried to gain any work from it or any business. Again, the brand is more important for us. We want people to look at QTS and think, okay, what do they do? And the more we are seen, the more that we will be able to attract really talented people. And that's what initially we set out to be. And we probably continue to do that. We also want to invest in sport. I mean, I love playing football. I was a very keen footballer. I unfortunately, my skill didn't match my ambition. I dreamed of playing for Rangers and captaining Scotland, none of which actually happened. So it was just one of these things. I think there is a path chosen for you in life, and certainly football wasn't one of them, albeit, you know, I've met my heroes now, and, you know, they say to me, you know, it must be great to be in your position. I thought, no, probably I would swap it all to be in yours, but anyway, that's just me. The thing about sport, and you know, the thing about QTS is that, you know, sport is mainly a team thing, but it's also, you have got to put the effort in. Even if it's an individual sport, you need to put the effort in. And that's what I keep saying to our guys. You know, we've got great teamwork at QTS. We continue to be successful. We've got a brilliant team, and we've got an important ethos that we try and look after each other. We try and move forward as a team. Sport, again, especially even before COVID, I think sport in itself had a real positive effect on people's health, and especially mental health. Now, even more so, you know, as we're going through this incredible time, mental health is it's priority to a lot of people, especially QTS, even within our organisation. We have set up mental health forums and a driving force to keep making sure that people stay connected. And again, sport it's fantastic for that. We've got you know, we touch quite a lot of sports, as Gordon mentioned, and that's important for us, especially if the fact is that the fact is that we are now looked upon as being a UK-based company. We want to make sure that where we are working, that we can have some effect on local communities, a positive effect. We want to get them to understand what we're trying to be doing in their community, and potentially, you know, again, as a branding thing, attract a local workforce, and whatever we can put back in to that local community is important for us. As I say, Derby, we got Derby. The reason we went for Derby was one of my senior directors was a Derby County fan, and he was keen that we weren't seen as just being a Scotland-based company. So again, we took that, and Derby proved pretty good for us. You know, they had 3 Scottish internationals with them at that time, all good lads, and yeah, I would say the benefit was excellent that we got from Derby. This was kind of pre Just Eat, so we got basically front and back and shorts, off shorts. I think certain football clubs now are changing, where will be maybe the sponsor on the front will be different from the sponsor on the backs, which kind of dilutes it a wee bit. So we were pretty fortunate at that point. So in that respect, it was good for us. But I would say that Killie was probably the best bang for buck that we had in that relationship. Plus the fact too, we are keen to support the local community, and Kilmarnock was a local club. So after we finished with Kilmarnock, we gave them 2 years' notice so that they had a chance to get a new sponsor. As it turned out, they were running out of time, and John Gall, who is a mate of mine and trains at my gym, I spoke to him one morning and I said, why don't you take over from QTS? And he went, oh, I can't afford it, and it's, you know, this and that. And I said, but John, it's not just about pouring money down the drain. You're a local organisation, you're a local company, but you also deal with the Tesco's, the Aldi's of this world. And I said, what more would you want in terms of Tesco's and Aldi's would love the fact you're sponsoring Kilmarnock Football Club. You could bring some of the players to their stores and stuff like that. It's, again, non-contentious. It's not Rangers, Celtics, Hibs or Hearts. It's a provincial family club. And he said, but yeah, and, you know, he was putting up a lot of barriers. So I spent about half an hour explaining to him why it would be more than worthwhile, and the benefit he would get by spending the money, he would get probably back 5-fold on it. And he came back the next day and he said they decided to do it, which is great because he's got a good business. It's Brown and the Bakers, and it's a local Ayrshire business, but it supplies to Tesco's and Aldi's. So again, it made sense for him to do it. That's more of a, I would say, his is brand awareness and marketing as well. So you would expect Kilmarnock supporters to go out and buy John's brands, which you would like to hope, with being associated with Kilmarnock fans, football club, they would do that. As for Darvel, Darvel is a junior football club, which in Scotland is a semi-professional. And again, John's involved in that, and he phoned me up and he asked me if we would get involved, of which I kept trying to keep away from junior football. But he said that, again, at the last minute, his shirt sponsor had pulled out. And the more I thought about it, I thought, well, you know, it's a local club, and he, you know, the committee and, well, John himself and the manager had put a lot of money into the club, and they've turned it around. The club, the football pitch, the wee stadium is looking fantastic. And when you see Darvel, it needs something like, it needs a good junior football team for the community to come around. It's starting to attract between 300 and 500, or it was pre-COVID, crowds, which is fantastic for a junior club, especially in Ayrshire. So, yeah, the more I thought about it, yeah, we would get involved. And I said that to him and he was delighted. And I think the fact was that because we had sponsored Kilmarnock, there was a huge kudos for him to get QTS in. And as I say, if we can help Darvel in any way, I'm more than delighted to do that. That's where I grew, I started the business. So again, it's close to my heart. And yeah, it was important that QTS put something back into that local community. Again, if you go to basically the Grand National and stuff like that, that's a different aspect. Again, that's purely brand awareness for the UK. And that's for QTS to be seen and for us then to be in the kind of UK focus, where our brand is incredibly strong. As you can see, it's like orange background, black lettering, and it looked amazing all round the racecourse and on the horses too. And it was probably seen by about, I don't know, probably over 500,000 people tuned in for the Gold Cup. Again, that's fantastic for us. That's, in terms of bang for our buck, we can't beat that. And it's usually, you know, it was even a good day then, even though there was no crowds at it, it's still a fantastic day. And I got asked the question by the Racing Post, why do you do it? You know, during COVID when other sponsors were pulling out. And again, the racecourse is very, very important for the local community. If COVID wasn't happening, then you would probably expect for the Grand National and the Gold Cup circa 20,000 on the Saturday. It's a massive thing for the local community. If you think of the hotels, the taxis, the pubs, the hairdressers, the dress shops, the makeup artists, all of them, you know, they rely on that. So the racecourse needed our help and we were more than happy to give it. And to be honest with them, they were fantastic with us, and we got everything and more that we wanted. And I think, as I say, I think it was a success for both parties on that. So we've got a youth athlete programme. And again, as a failed footballer and failed athlete myself, when we got into a position where we could help young athletes, then myself and Lisa, my marketing manager, decided that we'd put this together. And she's been inspirational in helping select the young talent that we've got. But when I was first starting my business, I used to dream in stages. You know, like, you know, I had an old van when I started. I borrowed £300 off my mum, and it was just me and my wee Jack Russell dog that started the business. And you know, you go home at night after a hard day's work, and you'd achieved something, but you used to dream. You know, I dreamt of like owning my first van, my first logoed van. So when we look at these young kids, then I know what they're doing. They're dreaming in stages, and you know, it's important that we can give them a leg up. We can maybe give them a leg up to a certain point, and then potentially other sponsors will see the benefit and maybe take over the baton on that. So as I say, that's, you know, we've got the two young guys that are the volleyball brothers, and a young girl that inspired me when I first met her was young Gillian McGaw, who's into motor racing with our bike, and disappointingly, she was getting quite a lot of abuse on social media, and for being a successful girl who's beaten boys in, you know, what was a male-dominated sport. That in itself inspired me to actually want to help her even more, because I think she's done a fantastic job against all sorts of trials and tribulations. So again, we're really inspired by the kids that we sponsor. We sponsor grassroots football teams across the UK. Again, it's all to do with basically community engagement, where if we are working in that local area, we try and get involved with the local community. If we can help, we try and even visit schools. You know, we're involved heavily with Women in Rail. Again, we try and encourage the young girls in schools to understand that there's a fantastic career within the rail network, and so we're keen to support that. Again, we've got, as you can see on the screen, we sponsored a diverse bunch of clubs, people, situations. You know, again, there's Northwest Boxing Club in Kilmarnock, on Thank, one of the toughest, roughest areas that you can get in the west of Scotland. And the two guys that run it are inspiring individuals, and they actually bring kids off the street. They give them some hope, they give them some discipline, and they also introduce the fact that working as a team is important, and not letting the other parts of the team down, which I think the kids in that, well, kids in a lot of areas need to understand that if they don't go to school, they could be letting other people down. If they don't turn up for a football team, they're definitely letting their teammates down. So again, these boys are inspirational, and we're so proud to be associated with them. Brand awareness, does it do much for us? It does a bit, but I think we look at what we want to do with the local community. We want to put that back in and try and help. We're also working with Chris Boyd. Chris was a former Rangers footballer who suffered a personal tragedy with his brother. And again, we're a big supporter of his mental health charity. And we also, along with Chris, put money in to provide school meals for children. And even more so now, when you think of what's going to happen in the run up to Christmas, this is vital for the kids. You know, and it was explained to me, one of the head teacher explained that the kids coming to school were starving. They were virtually unteachable. Once they had a meal, they were a totally different person. They could concentrate, and you know, we need to do more, and we are going to do more. And especially, you know, okay, Marcus has highlighted this, but certainly after speaking to teachers, you understand the real implications of kids not getting fed and going to school starving. So it's important that we work in partnership with the likes of Chris and the KB9 Academy to actually help the local community there. So basically from that point, I would say sponsorship is very important, but again, you've got to decide what you want out of it. And we want, it's brand awareness for us. If we get a job out it, then that's fantastic. But we are continuing to grow the company, so we continue to need talented people. So we continue to make sure the brand is there and everybody can see it. And if anybody sees it in a van, sees it on basically the racing or a football team, then hopefully they Google us and they see, well, you know what, I would like to work for that company. And that's what we're trying to get across. As I say, it creates you know, positive connections with the communities. There's no doubt about that. And it also helps our staff who work with us have kind of a feeling of pride. When I first basically started QTS, I dreamt of having a company where it was like playing for your favourite football team, whatever football team or whatever, you know, whatever sport you were involved in. It was like pulling on that shirt. You wanted to feel proud, and that's what I dreamt, and this is what I demanded of QTS, that the people that work for us are proud to actually wear our logo, and with that, and it brings a feeling of pride, I would like to think. It certainly brings a feeling of pride for me. You know, we, all of our directors, none of us power dress. We wear basically our t-shirts, with the black t-shirts with the QTS top, so that there is no looking at that there is a hierarchy there that you can't basically go and approach. Everybody is equal, and that's important for us in the ethos of the company. And again, it provides good social media and content, and also the local newspapers seem to love this sort of thing that we're doing, which is good, because we are trying to do good. Now, through COVID, we've been very fortunate. We have actually, probably with the exception of Amazon and everything like that, we've been incredibly successful through COVID, and it's down to the way we've been actually putting our sites, making everybody safe, doing everything that we possibly can to make our teams safe. And with that, the clients have seen that and allowed us to carry on the work and actually given us more work. So from a budget of, we budgeted 85 million, our year ended in September, 1st of October, and we've actually hit nearly 115 million, which is incredible coming through COVID. And but again, we've been fortunate, but we've done the right thing. It's cost us money to make sure that our people are safe, but we will spend what we need to spend to make sure that we've got the confidence of our staff and the client that we're doing things correctly. So as I keep going back to it, you've got to ask yourself, what is your business objective? And as I've explained, QTS is mainly brand awareness and also putting stuff back into the community. But, you know, we started, we were a small business, and it's amazing what small businesses can do, you know, with the local community. And, you know, we're not a Coca-Cola, we're not, you know, all of these other massive brands that you see, Boots. And it was brilliant listening to Andy. You know, it was very, very interesting what he was saying and how things are measured and everything like that. But I think, as he quite rightly pointed out, I think it's turning in the respect that the sponsors are actually looking for something back in terms of what can they show their clients, show their staff what they're doing with communities and what they're doing for the good of different parts of the UK or the world, for that matter. Anyway, so is sponsorship going to be right for you? Again, this is going to be what you guys have got to decide. Really, what you want out of it. I know we have got a pretty clear path now, so we're quite comfortable in what we expect. But again, it's not the easiest thing in the world. But with possibly the help of Andy, he could help certainly direct you in the way that you'd work out what is the best bang for your buck. So on that, I think I've covered near enough every point that I'd like to have got across.
Well, thanks very much, Alan. That's brilliant, and I think, to be honest, I'm sure we could have listened to you for some considerable time, and I don't think.
Did I overrun, Gordon?
Not to worry, not to worry. I did have a couple of questions, but I think you've probably ran through them, Alan, in there. But I'd appreciate it if you would stay on right to the very end, if you don't mind, just in case there are some questions from the audience that we can direct at you, because you've had a very interesting and I would consider a very dynamic influence over sport in Scotland. And like you say, you've helped at grassroots and you've helped profile at the top end. And you also, going by Andy's discussion at the beginning, have also influenced it with charity and raising the points that you just did earlier on. But I'd like to thank you again, Alan, very much indeed.
No problem,
for that. And we'll come back to you after we've had a chat with our next speaker, who is obviously Andrew Pindar, obviously a highly successful businessman like yourself, Alan. Andrew just came on. He's been very busy all day on various conference calls throughout the world, because GAC Pindar, and Andrew is probably one of the world's, if not the biggest sponsor of everything involved in sailing. Not only that, but Andrew is an ambassador for various aspects of the sport involved in disability sport and also lobbying to get that reinstated at Olympic level. And currently, at the present moment in time, has 2 active sponsorships in the world, one in one of the biggest sailing races, which is about to start on December the 8th, with a potential spectator audience of between 2.5 and 4 million. And that's called the Vendée Globe. He's also involved currently with the World Sailing Tour with athletes he's supported for very, very many years. But what I'd like to do now is obviously just introduce Andrew, who's going to give us a little bit of a discussion on his views on sponsorship, how COVID has affected it, and some of the things that Andrew is involved in connected to sports sponsorship. Andrew.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everybody. I think we're going to have a bit of I think we'd call it a discursive discussion about what's working in the world of sponsorship and maybe how I'm seeing a changing pattern through coronavirus. So let's see if that goes, if that's going to work. And I'm just going to wondering whether I can just put my gallery view on here. There we go. That's maybe going to be speaker view. There we go. I'm not sure that we're the biggest sponsor in sailing. I think that Sir Jim Ratcliffe sponsoring Sir Ben Ainslie, he's putting significantly more money into the INEOS sponsorship of Ben Ainslie and the INEOS America's Cup team than I will put in a whole lifetime of sponsorship. So we can't profess to be the biggest. What we can do is to certainly say that we've probably been involved in sponsorship for just about in sailing longer than anybody else that I can possibly think of. We've been sponsoring in sailing for something like 40 years now. So it means that we have a huge history of content that's been gathered and created in sailing. And that means that we're able to go back into our archives and leverage things that we've been doing within the sport over 4 decades. I wanted to actually talk about my professional sporting career in Scotland. I don't know if Alan's still on. Are you, Alan? You might not be aware of this, but I am looking personally for some sponsorship. I have been an athlete in Scotland and won money as a professional athlete at the Golspie Games. I don't know if you know Golspie, but one summer a few years ago, I went to the Golspie Games with my wife and our children and competed in the sack race, which I'd remembered how to win the sack race from being a schoolboy. And I did, and I won. I think I won a shilling, or maybe it was 5 pence or something like that. But so my experience as a professional athlete in Scotland is ready to come back again if we can find the right sponsor.
Renowned, Andrew, renowned. I mean yeah.
So Andrew, well done.
But all teasing apart, what I've been looking at is and in fact, Andy talked about it, Alan's talked about it, about the importance of the purpose of why people are involved in different pieces of sponsorship. Is it purely for an economic outcome? Is it purely because they think they're doing a brand build? Or is there a purpose to to what they're doing, which is deeper? And certainly for me and my observations of people, human behavior through COVID, is that people are suddenly standing back and asking the question as to whether the god of pure profit is the one that they should be chasing, and whether, in fact, the behavior of enterprises and the way that we manage ourselves has, in fact, gone too far in that, and that people are beginning to realize that to be a good citizen within society is something that's greater than, it's a greater purpose than just what happened on the balance sheet or what was taken out by way of dividends by some shareholders at the end of the year. And I think that is causing a reflection for many organizations. And we perhaps have seen that in the past when we've seen the corporate social responsibility side of organizations, which has often been a bit of a tag on to what people have been doing, I think, rather than something that's really the purpose of the enterprise, to seeing that we're now having people consider that their enterprises, their businesses have a role in society which is of a higher order. And so Mark Turner, who a number of people will know of, having been the man who, in a sense, created Ellen MacArthur and many aspects of sailing, he's been asking the question for a year or more now as to what is your why. And I think that when Mark came out with that, I was reflecting on what is my why, what is the reason why we might do something. And it was great listening to Alan's history of sponsorship within Ayrshire, because that means that there is an ownership and a sense of responsibility to society, not just to Alan McLeish's back pocket. And I think that we've got to then consider whether we are we using the right terminology? Because what is sponsorship after all? And when are we talking about philanthropy? And is philanthropy one and the same as sponsorship, or are they two very different things? And I don't know whether Andy's online still, Andy Westlake, but it'd be interesting perhaps at the end of this conversation, Gordon, if we could have a discussion about the role of where there is a crossover between philanthropy and sponsorship. A lot of people will come to ask me for sponsorship, and I think, well, you're asking me for the local golf club, the local cricket club, the local rugby club or something. I don't think I'm going to get any business advantage out of doing that. There might be some role to play. There might be something that's relevant to what I personally believe in, and in a way that I can personally contribute to my own local society. But that is more philanthropy than it is sponsorship, though it's often packaged up as being sponsorship. And for me, certainly, unless somebody challenges me differently, and I'd love to hear from Andy Westlake his view on this, I think that sponsorship for me is changing somebody's marginal propensity to do something. And marginal propensity to do something could well be marginal propensity to buy my products or my services rather than somebody else's. So causing somebody to feel good and familiar about a name or a brand, or having some association that comes through sport, which at the end of the day is generally the way we're doing things, is to influence people's thinking by getting them interested in the sport and then causing them to want to buy something. That's generally what I have been trying to do through the sponsorships that I've been involved in, whether it's on behalf of my own businesses or whether it's on behalf of other people's brands and companies that we've been taking to market. It's really causing people to shift the dial and to decide whether they are going to make a different decision to the one that they would have done without having seen those logos, without having had the involvement, without having had the mood and the feel in all the activation that would go with a particular piece of sponsorship. So it's the marginal propensity to do something. And that could be the marginal propensity for people, in Alan's case, to go and work for his organization, to make a specific choice because they are now seeing the QTS name and are feeling more comfortable about making a employer choice decision than they would have done previously. So again, he's caused a marginal propensity to do something. And I think that's where I'm also then looking at what's gone on through COVID. And Andy was talking about esport. We've been seeing that within sailing. And I have to say that when it was first coming out with e-sailing, I thought, what on earth is this? Surely sailing is all about people going out on boats, harnessing their own athleticism and their own skill and their study, going on something that floats, on a medium, which is water, which could be a lake, a river, or the sea, and harnessing the wind as the means of propulsion to drive that boat across the water. Surely that is what it's all about. How on earth could you think that e-sailing could possibly exist? And I was reflecting on that, and you know, I persuaded myself that I was entirely wrong, because I've heard many people now children who have started off with e-sailing which has caused them to then want to go and take up sailing as an active outdoor pastime. So that in itself is an interesting movement for the sport of sailing, that e-sailing actually is triggering the people to participate within the physical aspect of sailing. And Alan, I'd also like to wonder, I'm thinking of what age you might actually be. We have met, but I'm trying to think whether, as a boy, I had Subbuteo as a game, and though we might go and play football on the park on an evening, or at school, sports afternoon or something, a lot of my childhood, there was a few years when Subbuteo was the thing to do. And it was an interest in the sport of soccer that Subbuteo created. And I wonder whether, again, we are missing that connection. I certainly was missing the connection between the e-sport and the physical sport. And then I looked to the wider aspects of the sports of sailing through COVID, and looking at, I saw that William Ward, who from Clipper Ventures, who has I think the only profitable sailing, sponsored sailing program in the world, that he was on earlier on, and whether he's finding that the sponsorships that he's selling on his boats for around the world yacht races has been made easier as a result of COVID or harder. A number of he had to cancel his race halfway through an edition when they got halfway around the world. So clearly that was a major blow to his business. However, one of the things that I've been seeing is that there is a new breed of sponsor coming into the sailing marketplace who are looking for the attributes of the sport of sailing. They're looking for something that is driven by natural energy to propel a boat, and it's about how people come together to work as a team. And in his case, that's how you get a group of amateur sailors coming together to form a team that's going to sail around the world in every condition, from glorious sunshine to horrible storm-lashed seas. So certainly we're seeing that there is a move to people wishing to find purpose to what they're doing within their sponsorship, and having to have that through, I think it would be wrong at the minute through COVID for people to come and splash the cash, or looking as though they may have done all too well. Someone like Amazon, who's made a fortune out of the COVID experience, whilst other people are losing their jobs and their livelihoods and their homes and can't put food on the table. Is it possible to be seen to be splashing the cash at that moment? Or do you have to, if you're going to be investing, do you have to do so in a way that's giving back, to make sure that you don't subject yourself to complete criticism, and turn people off, and causing people, instead of having a marginal propensity to buy from you, causing people to have a marginal propensity to buy from anybody other than you. So I think that those questions are having to be asked at the minute. And then other aspects of this, when with Andy and the European Sponsorship Association, which great work, and I certainly concur that the people who are looking at the measurement tools and looking at the likes of the Repicoms and so on of this world, whether that is evidencing the decision making that they want to make or not make. Whilst I've also seen quite a number of sponsorships coming through still that clearly haven't been driven by a measurement system at all. They've been by the whim of the CEO or the major shareholder, who's just decided that now's the moment, and they're not going to wait for the measurement of the future, because you can't measure the future. They've gone into something by their gut, and I think that we're seeing some of that coming through at the minute, where there is some opportunistic sponsorship coming through, which is going to cause people to find sponsors that came out of nowhere. They were not sponsorships that CSM or IMG or the other Right Formula and the other people who are in that space would have necessarily come across, because somebody has, at a very senior level, just made a decision without reference to any agency. So that's probably me up to where I think I was just going to throw some stuff out there, Gordon. And very happy to try and get some discussion going there. I'll certainly try to create some questions for Alan and Andy if they're still on.
Absolutely fantastic, Andrew. That is really good. And you did bring in there a little bit earlier on a question for William Ward. And I noticed that William Ward, the CEO of Clipper Ventures, is actually, I think, still online. And I'm just going to unmute William, who might be able to give us a little bit of, let me just see how do I do this? Alice, can we just unmute William and see if we can?
You need to have somebody with more skills than you've got, Gordon, to do it, I think.
That's very true, and that's not difficult either, Andrew. So yeah, hopefully we can unmute William, and he can maybe.
Can you hear me?
He's on mute. Hi, William. Sorry, you're there. I noticed you're there in the question in the panel, and obviously Andrew and yourself know each other well through the international sailing world. But you've obviously got a fantastic race on the go just now, which had to park up in the Philippines with 12 of your boats. Do you want to talk? Just tell us a little bit about the conversation we had last night about China and all the development there, if you don't mind. Yeah, sure. Answering Andrew's question.
Hi, Andrew.
Hi, William.
Yes, yeah, well, we've suspended our race about 2/3 of the way through, which has given us untold headaches. But we've been going long enough to know that these are just par of the course, and we have to get on with it and make the most of it. The crew, amateur crews, so there was nearly 300 people that we had to bring back from the Philippines to 42 different countries. Logistical nightmare. But again, all doable in a modern world, and the crew absolutely have been fantastic. Amateur crew, they know that this is their adventure, and they know that this is not our make in COVID, and we're doing the best for it. So we've suspended our race part way. It was always the longest sporting event in the world, and it will certainly go down this one. I don't think it'll be beaten, because we're not going to finish now until February 2022, having started in September 19. So it's a pretty long-winded event. Most of the sponsorship talks and ongoing talks have really just been put on the back burner for the time being. We don't feel this is the time to really push on with future races. As far as we know, we're going in 22, 23. Around September, we start the next race. But in the meantime, we've just sort of mothballed a lot of the talks. So as far as, well, China is very different. China's a big sponsor of ours. We've got 3 Chinese cities, and they don't look for any measurement at the moment. They look to be part of an international event and for the people of China. So they see this as very different to a corporation where it has to hit all the bells and whistles as far as what it's going to make. And I've found that over the 20 odd years I've been with Clipper, and there is, Andy spoke very much about the science of it, and I'm an old bugger, and I suppose live off a lot of gut feeling, but I still feel it's exactly what Andrew said, as far as CEOs, you don't build a business up by the book. It's done by a lot of gut feeling. I mean, Alan is a great example of that. He borrowed £300. I borrowed £800 off my parents to start my business. He's obviously done better than I have, but it's the same principle. I was borrowed a van, and off we went. And I think really you can get too embroiled in the science of it. A Coca-Cola would need it if they were going to spend big bucks on the Olympics and things like that. But on a community level, and different things give a lot back. We had a scheme with one of the cities once where they put 10 youngsters, 18 to 20-year-olds, NEETs, not in education, employment or training. They'd had 300 grand spent on them that year by the council just in looking after them, basically. And the end result was that 9 of them ended up in employment, and it was really giving them that chance. So there's lots of aspects into, as Andrew said again, it bracketed into sponsorship, but it has to, it's philanthropic, it's community, it's sponsorship. So there's lots of ways of marketing something, and everybody, especially with something like a round the world race, it's very different to a football match as a one-off. So we have to look for sponsors that are looking outside the box. Sustainability is becoming one of the massive things. We've got 2 of our people working really hard on finding as much as we can possibly do to work on that, to please sponsors to make sure that we're doing the right thing and can give something back. You know, I'm at that age now with grandchildren, etc., that you do want to give something back. So I'm not sure if that answers all the direct questions, but does that help, Gordon?
No, absolutely. Thank you, Morgan. Sorry, Andrew.
I don't think it's a right or wrong anyway, is it? It's the space we're in. It is under the whole umbrella of marketing, and sponsorship is part of a marketing package. So you know, if you would hope that if Alan McLeish has got salespeople that are going to find the contracts for the company to win and deliver, they're going to have an easier access to on their pitch, because there is a familiarity about the name that wouldn't be there otherwise. And that's back to my marginal propensity for people to buy. So a reason for that is just to get that comfort in the pitch, that at least there is an awareness of who QTS is as a business. And if you're achieving that, then you're achieving some goals. And trying to drill down on whether that was a 38% name recognition versus a 43 actually isn't going to make much difference or not.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't.
And
Alan, do you want to maybe throw your hand in? Obviously, both.
Yeah,
Andrew
I mean the science. Yeah, the science is very interesting on it, but I think Andrew made a relevant point there that, you know, whether it's 38% or 45% didn't actually mean anything to us. We knew that after initially, you know, the first season of Kilmarnock, that what a difference it was making to our brand awareness. So we carried on, and then we looked at other scenarios where we could get the brand out, and then we looked further afield to show that we were a UK company. So again, the science, we never really looked into the science of it. At one time we did, we sponsored the League Cup in Scotland, and I think at the time they were struggling for a sponsor. We came in at semi-final stages, which was Rangers v Celtic, Dundee United v Aberdeen, I think, if memory serves me right. And we got it for a song, we really did, and the exposure we got was phenomenal. And again, it was explained to me by a couple of the media people that, you know, again, we weren't involved in alcohol, gambling, or anything like that, and the brand being strong. So they did a quick calculation for us, and they reckon our media exposure over that time, which was a fairly short spell of time, was something in the region of 1.5 million we would needed to have spent to get that brand and the value, double page spreads, back page, even part of the front page of a lot of the daily newspapers. So in that aspect, yeah, we could see the value, and we didn't pay anything like that. But again, we were in a fairly fortunate position. We had a bit of money to spend, and they came to us just at the right time. But negotiations were good as well, to be fair.
Part of my thoughts to that, Alan, is we've got to make sure that within what we're talking about sponsorship, we're also, I'll give you an example of, I was doing some work with another company who said, oh, they were going to be sponsoring one of the I think a big soccer, in fact it was Aberdeen Football Club, I think it was, and they bought some space around the scoreboard. And I said, well, hang on, you bought some that isn't to me sponsorship. That is actually you've done an advertising buy. Let's make sure that we've got the terminology right here, because when is it an advertising buy, when is it sponsorship, and when is it philanthropy? And that's one of the things, the questions I'm really keen to get Andy Westlake to come in if we can, Gordon, because
well, let's bring Andy in now, Andrew, because yeah, what you're really saying, there are blurred lines. So we've had William on talking about, as I know William well, a very similar model to Alan and in fact yourself, Andrew, that you've relied very much on gut feel as your decision to put your brand on the side of whatever you've decided in sport. But Andy, I'd like to bring you in. Obviously, you've had, you know, without me putting these questions.
Before you do that, I need to say that over the years we have measured and measured and measured. So though I might do something based on a gut feel and what I believe in, and there are all sorts of a myriad of reasons why I might sponsor any particular person, which is normally because there's something of a hunch, which can be right or wrong. But we have sought to measure, because I've tended to have boards of directors or colleagues who, unless I can give them some evidence, then they won't. Whereas I would happily, as a right-brained person, will go down that path. As left-brained people, the accountants and the engineers and others, they want to see some proof. So I think so I think we need to. I don't want to position myself as looking as though I'm doing everything that I do based on gut and feel and so on. I need to measure it as well, because you've got a whole entity, an enterprise to carry with you.
Yeah. And
Andy, can I pass it on to you?
Yeah, no, sure. And I Andrew, I also think there's a massive role for intuition. You know, I mean, I think good sponsorship can be an art as much as it is a science. And I think when, you know, in my agency days, if we'd been given a brief by a client, I think we would immediately have an intuitive idea of what the right answer was. That platform that felt like it represented the values of the brand in the most accurate way, that talked to the right kind of audience, gave the opportunities for engagement that were right for that particular brand. And so you'd probably intuitively, really, really quickly get to a point where you thought, do you know what, that thing, that product, that property is probably the right place to be. But I think you're right. Your point is that you need to back that intuition up to ensure that you absolutely go down the right path, that you pick the right property, that you embed objectives right at the start if you're spending proper money, and you put measurement criteria in place so that you know what good looks like. But, you know, I think there's a massive role for intuition in our world. I think chairman's whim still does exist. And I think many of the salespeople out in the market, you know, people that are selling on behalf of rights holders, are desperate for chairman's whim to continue to exist, because I think deals are still getting done on that basis. You know, that they find a guy that loves a certain football club or loves golf or loves a certain sport, and that they will back that sport as a result of that chairman's whim, if you like. But, you know, on behalf of ESSA, I guess I should be banging the drum about sponsorship being a really valid and credible alternative to spending money elsewhere in the marketing mix. And every single one of those other channels in the marketing mix will have really, really robust measurement criteria attached to them. And so we have to do the same to compete for those pounds against TV or radio or above the line or digital or whatever it might be. To answer your question about philanthropy and sponsorship and advertising, look, I mean, for me, they're relatively separate things, but for sure there is an overlap. Philanthropy is a donation. I don't think anybody puts money into something as a philanthropic gesture expecting to see any kind of return back from it. So it might be a donation to a charity. It might be a donation to a young athlete, because you just want that athlete to achieve the best outcomes. Alan talked a little bit about the money they're putting into young athletes, and I'm sure Alan doesn't necessarily think that he's going to get direct business benefit out of that, but it's a good thing. It's maybe partially a philanthropic investment. For me, sponsorship is a business transaction. You know, the rights holder wants to get money into their organizations, and they are 100% signed up to delivering that sponsor with their business objectives in return. And so sponsorship is absolutely, it's a two-way relationship between a rights holder, a sponsor seeker, and a brand. And the rights holder gets their benefit. More often than not, it's financial in nature. And the sponsor gets their benefit. More often than not, it should be sales oriented in outcome. And so you should see that, you know, brand awareness, shifts in values metrics, more engagement from your employees will in turn deliver better return on investment and better revenue. I think your point about advertising, Andrew, is right as well, though, because I think somebody saying, oh, we've bought an advertising hoarding at a football match and calling it sponsorship is it's not sponsorship for me. Sponsorship should be where the brand are adding value in some way, shape or form to the passions of that particular audience. And so one of my bugbears actually often is broadcast sponsorship being called sponsorship, because actually broadcast sponsorship often is a brand attaching their name to a show, but doing nothing concrete really to add value to the experience of the viewers. Many really good broadcast sponsorships do. So you look at I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, and the sponsors that have been involved in that show over the years will be activating at point of sale, will be developing stuff that's for sale in store that will get more people walking through the doors and will sell them more products. So some broadcast sponsorships are really activated like sport or arts or core sponsorships do, but there are many things that are touted as sponsorship, but in my view probably aren't. So yeah, look, I think there's a place for philanthropy, because I think, you know, people want to give money to causes that they believe in, and they certainly don't want to get anything back as a result of it. But sponsorship, and Alan talked about some of the things that he does, you know, for him there will be a tangible return in terms of the values attached to his business, and activating and amplifying the values that are important to the organization that he runs. So yeah, look, I think there's a place for all of those. But I think, you know, I would say this, wouldn't I, work, you know, as chairman of ESSA, but I think sponsorship done well can be extraordinarily powerful, because it puts a brand right at the heart of these great experiences, and fans of those experiences say, yeah, that brand did that for me, so I now feel warmer, better, more inspired to buy their product as a result.
Yeah, here's a question for you, if I may, Andy.
Could I come in just for a sec, Andrew, if you don't mind? Because I've got some questions coming in from outside, if you don't mind. I wouldn't mind, could we have that question that's just came in from John Roberts? Now, John Roberts is heavily involved in the football circuit, and so John basically has asked a question. Brilliant presentations, thank you to all. ESG principles are undoubtedly becoming more attractive to would-be investors. Is this a consideration in the decision-making process? So
shall I take that? So we're talking about environmental, social and governance, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, look, I mean, as I said earlier, I think environmental issues are really, really on the rise. More and more rights holders are taking that incredibly seriously. I'm sure the stuff that Andrew does in the world of sailing, you know, there's so much great work going on the sustainability front with some of the biggest sailing organizations in the world. And I think for the sports rights holders out there, the governance agenda is more powerful than it ever has been now. So, you know, UK sport funding doesn't get given out unless the rights holders concerned are taking their own internal governance incredibly seriously. That captures a whole bunch of stuff. It's about you know, the number of women they have on their boards, the number of Black, Asian, minority, ethnic people they have working on their workforce, all of that stuff. And so I think it's important for sponsors to have a voice and a point of view on that stuff. But clearly, issues around environmental, social, and governance are getting more and more important, and so sponsors need to factor that growth into the kind of work that they do in the future around activation, I would say.
Yeah.
Great. Andrew, your thoughts on that? Obviously, with sailing being, you know, very clean and green and all the plastics and the oceans, I take it that's of importance to you as well.
I think it's important. I think we've got to first of all, there's a problem with sailing, as there is a problem with anything that any of us do, in that we are by living, we are consuming, and therefore we are not. But you know, build a carbon fiber racing yacht to go around the world. It's made out of carbon, so and it's taken an awful lot of energy to get there. So Having some claim of being totally green is misleading, really. However, we can do is to make sure that everything we do within the sports that we're involved in, or the other activities we're involved in, we can work to minimize our environmental impact. We can also, and I think this is where the European Sponsorship Association will be probably doing quite a lot of work, and they'll be thinking about it, it's the importance of how you can use sport to communicate messages to target audiences and to influence groups of people. And I think that that's where we've got to make sure that we understand what it is we're celebrating out of sponsorship of, let's say, sailing. But we've got to be very careful we don't start to go down the path of greenwashing. There have many been tempted to do so, and woe betide them for doing so, because at some point somebody will bite back at them. So we've got to be very careful we don't overclaim something, but if we recognize the role we have to play with sport as the trigger vehicle for that, then I think that we're fine to do so. And sailing, clearly, by working towards having recycled boats, using the boats, as in the ocean race, that we're going to see the fleet of boats go around for the third time, the Volvo 65s in the next ocean race, which is great progress, because otherwise they were building yachts for one race and then they were being sold for scrap just about. We certainly see that within the America's Cup. There is no, there's going to be trickle down benefit from this next America's Cup, but the America's Cup foiling monohull, 75-foot monohull, you're not going to be able to go and race one of those on a weekend off Scarborough. And there's no way that William Ward's going to be able to sell spaces on one of those to go racing around the world. They are going to go to the scrap heap, or they're going to go to a museum. So the millions, one of those boats will have cost 50 million plus to build. 50 million. They're brilliant science, the brilliant engineering, their invention is incredible. So you've got to celebrate what they're about. You can't pretend that they are environmental and green. Don't go down that path. Celebrate what they are great at doing, which is to communicate a message about a sport to an audience.
Let me bring William and then Alan in just to answer that question. William will bring that in just because you're on the subject of yachts, and then we'll bring in Alan to talk about his sport and what he's doing, especially with the rail network and his business and all the links within it. But let me just bring in William, if you don't mind. William, I think you're unmuted. If you'd want to just maybe comment on that, please.
It says I'm open, but so can you hear me?
Yep.
Which question though? Well, as far as using the boats, because I absolutely agree. I think too many people try and say they are environmental friendly. We can do this, we can do that. And all we can all do is strive to do our bit. So as a company, regardless of us being a sailing company, we're looking to do whatever we can within the office environment, lights, heat, the things we use. Everybody has their own mug rather than throw away cups all the time. All those little bits that we can do, and that wouldn't matter whether we were a building company or a sailing company. On the boats itself, yeah, I mean we've always used, our business model has never been one to build the boats and throw them away. We couldn't afford it. It's a very, very different model. I mean, our boats will do 5 races. The original fleet of yachts built in '96 are all still working and giving youth training and things like that. So none of it is wasted from that perspective, but we all create waste and we all drive to places. And one of the things that sponsors want in a city, we had 150,000 people in Derry over a 6-day period to watch, to see the Clipper boats. There was queues. And they're all driving in, but that's part of life. I mean, we can't get away from that. We all have a car and we all want somebody else to save while we go out and be extravagant. But as long as, while there's government rules and why we're now all thinking about it as owners of companies, we think very differently. I mean, I think very differently now than I did 10 and certainly 20 years ago. I mean, the waste of 20 years ago, we wouldn't even dream of doing now. But so I think any business can do their bit. Sailing, I mean, once we get going, it's the wind that powers us, etc. So from that perspective, and we've been doing a lot of surveys because our boats go to places in the world that no one goes to. And when we cross the North Pacific, nobody's ever, even in modern times, people do not do surveys there. So we can help the environment by collecting data. And we've seen the mile-long stretches of plastic and things like that. And those sort of things do have to come to a stop at some point, otherwise it will stop all of us.
Alan, you've obviously your business model talking about, you know, the environment and things. What have you implemented within your sport and business model?
Well, not so much sport, Gordon. That's the kind of strange thing. You know, we are sponsoring air races and stuff like that. You know, whatever the racecourse has done to actually be more environmentally friendly, I'm not totally sure. I know from the QTS's perspective, it's high in our agenda. We have, for a number of reasons, you know, for a moral conscience, but also for the fact that our clients are demanding to see what we're trying to do, you know, what innovations we're bringing in, whether it's fuel saving, we're introducing all of our staff are getting opportunities to now buy electric cars through a different type of scheme. All of these sort of things actually help us win work. As for us looking at, you know, where we put our money in terms of sponsorship, that's a different kettle of fish. That's, you know, does Kilmarnock Football Club, they're looking at different aspects. I think everybody is looking at different aspects. Would we sponsor somebody that wasn't environmentally friendly? No, we wouldn't. And it's as simple as that, we wouldn't.
Brilliant. Thanks, gentlemen. Thanks, William, for also joining in there and giving your opinion on that. But if there are any more questions, please, is there any looking to speak? If you'd like to wave at Alice or ask any questions of our panelists. Any more questions? John, if you would like to unmute, has that answered your question? If you'd like to unmute yourself. Right. I don't think John's able to unmute.
Hello, Gordon.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah. Hi, John.
Hear me okay? Yeah, thanks,
right?
Gordon. Yeah, to a degree, Gordon. Alan, I was particularly interested in your response to that question. Where it was coming from was not so much you investing or sponsoring a company that was environmental friendly. Where I was coming from as an investor in a company like your company with good ESG principles, I would see you as attractive. So not only are you getting the benefit of sponsorship and helping your community as clearly you have done, but you're increasing the attraction of your company to me as an investor. And I think that's something that's you picked up on it well, Andy, but that's something that's missed. And I think that's an area perhaps, Gordon, you could expand upon in future. So does that make sense to you, Alan? Yeah,
no, it does. You know, unfortunately, we don't get anybody sponsoring us. But no, I get that, and I totally get that, and it would be something that. Sorry, where I'm coming from, when I look at the company that bought out QTS, their bigger investors are very, very keen on ESG. They are. That's high up in their decision-making process. So yeah, they are. I was wondering actually if prior, when you're a great company, and it's interesting to hear your story and how you built it up. It's fantastic. But did you deliberately increase your effort of sponsorship with a view to making the overall package more attractive to investors? That's no, to be honest with you, no. The sponsorship came by accident, and the one thing that actually, I suppose, it's kind of like horse and cart and cart and horse. I'd never actually thought I would sell, but what I wanted to do was build a strong team round about that would then continue. And to actually get a strong team, I had to make sure that people understood what QTS was about and the ethos of it. And that was helped with the sponsorship of Kilmarnock Football Club and races, because people then started to look into what we're about. And that was, as I say, it came not through a great plan. But you're right, you know, the city, the company that bought over QTS, Renew Holdings, were very keen on what we do environmentally. and community based as well.
Yeah.
And also, I must admit, the bottom line too. You know, keen Parliament too. So, but as I say, no, I think you've got to look at it from the full package of what we do. We are heavily involved with, you know, key kind of programs within the rail infrastructure for, and you know, environmentally aware jobs. It's incredibly hard now what you've got to do and what you've got to allow and what the surveys you've got to do. But it's good that we've got to do that. You know,
yeah.
It means that the environment is getting looked after. There's a lot of stuff on the rail infrastructure that could be done a lot better. And I think Network Rail are starting to grasp that as well. And you know, they are seriously looking at all aspects of the environment now, which is good, and it's perfect for us because we are strong on the environment, everything that we try and do. So yeah, to answer your question, that it was important that we had all of that put together. But don't get me wrong, you know, again, it was my dream to create an HQ that was almost self-sustaining in the respect that we bought a farm. It was a struggling dairy farm. Actually, the reason the farm was struggling was because of the ground conditions. So I'm from a forestry background, so the first thing I dreamt of was planting 150,000 trees, which we did. We found a 60-acre bog within the site that had been drained, and we decided we'd put it back to what it was. Again, the carbon capture on that was huge. So we actually blocked all the drains up, and we brought it back to what it was 1,000 years ago. We have solar panels, you name it. We've got, as I say, rainwater catchment. We've got insulation that, I mean, we're virtually on no heating at all. We've got ground source heating where we require it. So we've got solar panels that heat the water. So we're high on that. We're constantly looking to bring that to our clients. And you know, one of the things that we're speaking to Network Rail about is, you know, why shouldn't they look at when they clear embankments and cut down all the trees and stuff like that? Why don't they plant a wildflower mix that would actually bring a lot of different wildlife in? And they like that idea, you know. And again, but maybe 5 years ago, 3 years ago, even they would have kicked that out. They just not. Yeah. But things are changing dramatically.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, I agree. I think they are, and a lot of it's been driven by the city for sure. And be it deliberate or otherwise, you have ticked every ESG box, and I think we could all learn from that. And the fact that you've done it and got involved in sport and areas where you've got a bit of passion as well is great. Well played. It's a great story.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much for that question, John. I just wonder if there are any more questions from anybody out there at all. Alice, do we have any? So I must admit, I found that extremely interesting. I hope that everybody who's came online has found that interesting, as well as the first of our webinars from VIA Sponsorship. I would like to thank Alan, Andrew and Andy very, very much indeed, and William of course as well, for popping in and following up on it just regarding that specific subject, but of yacht racing. But I'd like to thank all of my speakers and all of my attendees, and hopefully we will see you next week at VIA Sponsorship.